Welcome to School Facilities and Operations Podcast. I am Burke Jones, your host, and I am a facility director. Technical title is Director of Operations for a K-12 school district in Kansas. And on the podcast, what we do is kind of two different types of shows. One is I bring on other facilities guys in K-12 education and other districts, and we just have some cool conversations about what they're doing in their day-to-day jobs. And usually we learn a lot about some new ideas from them. And then the other type is we bring on a trade partner and we really dive into things that we need to know when we're working with these different trade partners, whether it be roofers or pavement guys, flooring guys. We invite them on just to really share some knowledge and things that we need to know that we don't know because we don't do it every day. And so today I have Andy Waller from Encore Pavement joining us on the show. So welcome, Andy.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So tell us just a little bit about your career and where you started, where you came from, and a little bit of your background. And then also just share something with us that we wouldn't know about you from reading LinkedIn.
Okay. So I was born and raised in El Dorado, Kansas. Went to college for a couple of years at Butler Community College and then went to Wichita State. While I was going to Wichita State, I started a pavement maintenance company, used to be called SPS. A lot of schools in Kansas will know that name. 3 years ago, had a little transition, an ownership transition, a buyout that happened. So I bought out a partner and brought on a couple new partners with some new expertise, and we rebranded and we're Encore Pavement now. So that's a very long story short, but that was 17 years ago that I started SPS and been doing asphalt and concrete ever since, and it's been fun.
So did you start out with like a pickup and a thing of cold patch, or where did you start?
Yeah, pretty close. Kind of a pickup and a shovel. So my story in college was waking up at 4 a.m. sometimes before, going out, getting some work done. I would have my, of course, old clothes on, getting the work done. Also did all the estimating, so I would keep a nice pair of clothes in the back seat. And I would literally change, go meet with a customer and measure the project, type up the bid on a laptop, had a printer in the back seat, would literally hand them the bid right then, go back to the job site, put my old clothes back on and get back to work. And then in the evening, I would do evening classes till sometimes 9 or 10 at night, go home, try to get a little sleep and wake up and do it again. And that's just kind of how this thing got started.
That's
luckily I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of the story that, you look at someone who's successful and you're like, it was an overnight success. It was, a 17-year overnight success.
No, this was a grind and it was a lot of work to get to this point. Trust me. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. So what's something that we couldn't read about you on LinkedIn?
So, I'm a huge outdoorsman and love to fish. And I actually, I've traveled the world going fishing, and I have 3 young boys that are really getting into it as well. And so they are starting to go along and really get the itch to fish. And part of that itch kind of urged me to purchase a bait and tackle store that's in El Dorado by the lake. So that's one little fun side business that I have that you might not know about. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I didn't picture you as a bait and tackle shop owner. So
bait and tackle guy too.
Get some discounts on your worms that way.
There you go. There you
go. Well, let's dive in. I wanted to have you on because, parking lots are something that every school has. And I think they're probably, depending on the district, it depends on the level of maintenance that they want to keep their parking lots at. I'm a pretty big guy that I want nice parking lots because that's one of the first thing everybody sees.
Yep.
So we're trying to build out some plans, looking forward for capital outlay money and making sure we have enough appropriated for that. But I guess let's just kind of start at the beginning. Like if we're talking about asphalt paving, what's kind of the lifespan of, if you put in a brand new parking lot,
Yeah.
what could you kind of expect and what do you need to do to it in those
So
years?
the preventative maintenance program that you implement right after the parking lot's installed has a huge impact on the longevity of the lot. So an ideal maintenance plan that we recommend is apply your first seal coat 12 months after the initial paving. You know, as soon as the paving's done, of course, it's jet black and looks great, which should look great. And then after 12 months, the surface will oxidize and turn gray. And that's the ideal time to get the first seal coat on. I always compare it to painting the siding on your house. You paint the siding when it's in great shape to keep it in great shape. We don't wait till the siding starts rotting to apply the first paint, right? So same exact principle of the seal coating has the best return on investment when applied when the asphalt's in good shape versus after it's almost gone and you're trying to, you know, save it. So
Right.
the ideal kind of maintenance rotation would be first seal coat in 12 months after initial installation, and then crack sealing is the best return on your investment that you can do. Keeping water from getting under the parking lot is critical, especially in Kansas where you have so many freeze thaw cycles. Water under the parking lot is a recipe for disaster, and that can just have a domino effect on the longevity. So 12 months seal coat, crack seal 2 years after that, and then seal coat again in 4 years. So basically every 2 years you're crack sealing and every 4 years you're seal coating.
Okay.
Ideally.
Yeah. I guess one of the big picture questions. I know that asphalt pavement's really popular in Kansas, but is it popular coast to coast? Or do they look at more concrete?
Yeah, you know, certain markets are different. You're seeing about 50-50 right now in Kansas. Used to be probably 80% asphalt, 20% concrete. But as oil and fuel have gone up in cost, you know, that's starting to get close enough to where, you know, concrete's still a little higher, but there's no maintenance over time. So you're kind of starting to see a little bit of a balance there. And, you know, the size of the parking lot and distance from the material plants and the rock quarries, and there's a lot of different factors that go into the overall cost of the project, and location is a major factor there. But I would say if it's close, you know, it probably makes sense to look at concrete right now.
Yeah, it's probably especially for the life cycle when you figure
Yep.
in the lifespan. So assuming we kind of maintain everything perfectly, is that what's kind of the lifespan where we would need to look at doing a mill and overlay for the first time?
Yeah, so on a new parking lot, if the preventative maintenance is done, you know, regularly and on schedule, I think you could get 12 to 15 years out of your parking lot before your mill and overlay.
Okay.
If you install a lot and do nothing, I would say, you know, you can be looking at anywhere from 7 to 8 years on a mill and overlay, sometimes less, depending on the wear and tear and the amount of traffic you have.
Right. So when you say if we're talking about if we do no maintenance, can you still mill and overlay that at the end of the life, or is it probably
Depends how long you wait.
Yeah.
So they do reach a certain point where you start to lose the stability of the base underneath the parking lot, and when you lose that, you lose everything. So that goes back to the crack sealing to prevent moisture from getting in, and also when you have a small pothole pop up or an alligator area pop up, get those fixed right away before they get big, because those are ponding water and allowing, hundreds of gallons to seep underneath your parking lot and migrate and cause other issues downhill. So very important.
So are those alligator areas, do you typically have to cut out full depth and replace full depth, or can you just mill and overlay that small area?
Well, so if you see alligator cracking and it's fairly level, a lot of times you can get away with a 2 to 3 inch depth repair. But if you see the same thing and it's sinking or holding water, or maybe you see some mud or base material pushing through, then that's definitely a full depth repair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that where we have a hole and then we just keep pouring more cold patch in it. It just keeps sinking down.
Yeah, the thing with cold patch, it levels out the pothole, but you're still getting all the water in that depression. It's all seeping around and still causing more issues. So that's one of the reasons cold patch just doesn't last very long.
Okay. So in asphalt, there's really two courses, I guess. There's the base course and then the top. So is the base course like a different mix? Is it more dense or?
Yeah, the base mix has a larger aggregate, so it's got a better weight bearing capacity.
Okay.
Compacts differently, has a little bit different oil in it. And it's really for the overall strength of the parking lot. And then the surface has smaller aggregate, a little more sand, a little more oil content, and it's really designed to withstand the tires and all the elements better than the base would. So if you've ever seen a parking lot with the incorrect mix on the surface, you're going to see really large rock and really loose aggregate at a very short time frame, and it's not going to wear properly. So it's very important to have the right mix and the right lift.
Okay. Does asphalt depend a lot on constraining with curbs? Like if you just go and put asphalt over land with no curbs, does it want to push out? In other words,
it does. It sometimes wants to push out, but also wants to drop off. So you've seen the parallel cracking along the edge of a parking lot with no curb. It starts to depress over time, doesn't hold weight as well. The other thing that we have in Kansas is Bermuda, which is an unbelievable grass that loves to grow in parking lots for some reason. And I've seen parking lots lose as much as 5 to 6 feet of their overall width because Bermuda just keeps creeping in every year. And with curbing, it pretty much creates that barrier where it doesn't start to creep in.
I hadn't even thought about that. I mean, some places in the United States, Bermuda is like the grass.
So, yeah, it's kind of a pest around here, I think.
It is.
That's the way I look at it.
We all like our beautiful green fescue lawns, but then we dump hundreds of gallons of water to keep them looking that way.
Yep. Yes, we do.
So kind of what do you look for, like as we're looking at the condition of our lots? Is there like visual cues that like, hey, we should be thinking about milling and overlaying this?
Yeah.
As they reach that kind of end of their first season of life?
Yep. So when I assess a new parking lot, the first thing I'm looking for is the condition of the actual surface. I'm looking at, is there loose aggregate or is it still fairly tight? Are you starting to see the rock or you still see a lot of sand? So the sand is always the first thing that goes on the surface. And a little clue for me is I look in the low areas and along the curbs, and if I see piles of sand, a lot of times that's not from the school actually putting sand on the parking lot for snow. It's actually coming off of the surface of the parking lot. So I see it all over the place, and a lot of people can't figure out where all this strange sand comes from. It's actually chipping off the surface of the lot, and it's real prevalent on lots that don't really get seal coated. because the salt and sun and water has a tendency to really chip that off quick, whereas a seal coat kind of bonds that together and prevents that.
Yeah.
So that's one of the first things I'm looking for is condition of the surface, and is it sound enough for a seal coat to adhere properly? And if it's too loose on the surface or too coarse, then the seal coat is not going to stick properly. And I'm going to tell you, it's probably a foregone conclusion that you need to mill and overlay, and a seal coat is probably going to be a waste of money because it's only going to last a year or two.
Okay.
So at that point, I'd make a recommendation to steer you to a mill and overlay. Then I'm looking for repairs. I'm looking for any potholes, alligator areas. I'm looking for large cracks that are, an inch or wider, because those need a different type of repair than the smaller cracks that can be sealed. Then I'm looking at drainage problems. If there's ponding water, I want to know why, and I want to look at different solutions, because a lot of times you can incorporate simple drainage improvements into a mill and overlay with the right planning. So
Okay.
all kinds of different things. And then even curbing that's possibly buckled or sinking, is that causing the issue? Does that need repaired, replaced before the paving? Because if we have to match a curb that's sinking, the overlay is going to still pond water. So we want to get to the root of the problems and incorporate all of that into the same project, and at the end of the day have a much better design.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
So when you mill an overlay, do you just mill off the top layer, or do you go down into the base layer a little bit?
No, it's usually a mill and overlay is 2-inch depth, and 98% of all top lift paving is 2 inches. So most of the time we're just barely scratching the surface of the base lift when we're doing that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen it where you can see like the bigger aggregate, once you mill off the top. So
Yep. And so kind of the process there is, after the milling takes place, we do an inspection of the base lift, and sometimes you'll see underlying problems that have a lot of widespread cracking, or it's sinking, or you're starting to see some base popping through. And at that point, you really need to do some full depth repairs to stabilize the base before you pave the top, because the top surface will be no better than what's underneath it.
So if you cut out a section and do a full depth repair, is that as good as what the original, will it end up sinking in that area over time, or is it?
No, if done properly, it's just as good as the original. Now, sometimes you'll remove the bottom lift of asphalt, and then you'll find really soft or saturated base material. At that point, you need to go even further and do a 6 to sometimes even 8-inch over excavation, pack new rock in, then bring the base lift of asphalt up with new mix, and then pave the surface all in one lift.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a situation by situation thing, and you just you kind of got to know what you're looking at.
Yeah. How many times can you mill an overlay?
I've seen lots where you can mill an overlay 3 or 4 times. As long as you are keeping water out of the base, that base can actually have an extremely long life cycle. But as soon as water gets underneath and you start to lose the integrity of the base lift, and the base rock gets wet, and that starts causing other problems, then you're looking at a full replacement. But I've seen parking lots milled and overlaid 3 to 4 times.
Wow.
Over the years.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I think it's just that ongoing maintenance that I know we probably struggle with, and most districts probably struggle with, but it's your cheapest investment is those annual or every 2 year, every 4 year kind of deals can give you quite a bit more life out of your lot.
It really does. And I see a lot of districts, put in the brand new parking lot for a bond issue, for example, but have no long-term plan on how to maintain it. And it's just kind of maybe replaced on the next bond cycle, right? Whereas if we planned on some preventative maintenance in between, you could have probably doubled the life of that, right?
Right.
So I think it all goes into pre-planning.
Yeah.
And at the same time, a budget is a budget, and you can only spend what you can spend.
Right.
You know, the budget for schools has been up and down a lot in the last 5-6 years. And if you
Right.
only have so much, then I think having someone that can help prioritize is important. I see a lot of districts try to put their entire budget into their oldest parking lot that's in really bad shape and let all the good ones go. And I'm going to tell you to do the exact opposite. That bad lot is already bad. And if you throw all your money at that, then your good lots are going to continue to deteriorate. So I'm going to say put your money towards your good ones to preserve them. And the other one will just get eventually replaced, and maybe you just try to hold that thing together and patch a few potholes and
Right.
let it go. But the rest of the district, some crack sealing and seal coating can go a long way.
Yeah. That's really good. That's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to look ahead and have budgets that, have money budgeted for the next 10 years to do crack sealing and seal coats on some of our newer lots. So
Yeah.
those timeframes are good to know. I'm going to make a note of that after the show.
Yeah, and you can, ideally, you know all your square footages of all your parking lots, and maybe if you're on a 4-year seal coat rotation, you do a fourth of them 1 year and a fourth the next year, and that way you kind of have a consistent cost, and you know everything that's getting done year 2, year 3, year 4, and then you start over.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. So I guess moving away from asphalt a little bit to concrete. I know we've done the last couple of lots we've done that are concrete. We did that fiber mesh
Yeah.
concrete. So maybe, I guess, talk a little bit about the difference between that and what I'll call sort of more typical rebar parking lot.
Yeah, so kind of the latest reinforcement for concrete is a fiber mesh reinforcement, and that's actually blended into the concrete in the truck and poured, simultaneously. There's different types of fiber. There's microfiber, which is extremely small. It almost looks like animal hair, for lack of a better term, after it's finished. That's for kind of non-load bearing concrete like sidewalks and patios. Really does a great job at preventing cracking. And there's 2 types of concrete. There's concrete that's cracked and concrete that's going to crack. So right. I mean, that's the only 2 types of concrete. So when it does crack, the good thing about fiber is you've got thousands and thousands of fibers holding it together and preventing it from becoming more than a hairline. So hairline cracks, they don't really cause a lot of issues. When they start buckling and separating more, that's when you really get the problems. So that's the great thing about fiber. The other thing about fiber is the cost to the contractor is actually about the same as full wire mesh. So if we're looking at wire mesh versus adding fiber to our concrete, our cost is actually extremely close, but where you save is on labor. So it takes more labor to lay all the mesh. Say we're putting in a new parking lot. That's a lot of work, putting down all the mesh and the chairs and everything else that you got to get it at the right elevation. Whereas fiber, you're just setting an outside form and you're laying it, and you can get more done in a day. And a lot of times a school or anybody will see a pretty good savings there. And it's actually, there's been a lot of studies where the fiber, if done properly, is actually stronger than mesh and not quite as strong as full rebar. So it lands somewhere in the middle. So I'm a firm believer in the product. I think it's really good.
Yeah, I like it as well. One of the problems I have with the mesh is while you're pouring concrete, everybody's walking on it.
Yeah.
You're relying on some guy with a hook to get it pulled back up to the, I mean,
And let's be honest, sometimes it doesn't get pulled up all the way, right?
no, there's no
Yeah.
way it can.
And if it's laying on the dirt, it's not doing a whole lot for you. It really
Right.
needs to be in the middle of the slab. So,
Right.
whereas the fiber is kind of mixed all throughout. And on the load bearing concrete, there's a large structural fiber that we do that's much different than the microfiber, and it really does add a lot of load bearing capacity to it. And it'll be a lot thicker on the surface after you finish everything, but it will wear off over time. You know, as tires turn on it and things, it'll start to smooth out. But
Yeah.
it has a
Someone
little
asked me,
bit of
we
a
did a
different
new,
look.
yeah, we did a new lot and someone's like, why does our parking lot look furry? I'm
Yeah.
like, it won't, just give it time, it'll go away.
Give it a year. Yeah.
One of the things I did notice on one of our lots, we had there was like a little, after time, there was like a little hole and it looked like it was just like concrete slurry that had been over it. But there was like a massive fiber that didn't get mixed in, I think.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like, you could just almost pull it out of there. Like it was just a chunk.
That does happen sometimes if it doesn't get mixed all the way in the truck, or I think that comes down to just a little bit of attention to detail, probably, of you know, the guys that are laying it down. If they see a big ball of fibers, you know, just toss it aside or put it in the bottom somewhere, but never leave it on the surface.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was probably just deep enough. They may not have, you know, they may have just finished over it and not even noticed, but
it's possible. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
it was,
that does happen. Yep.
Yeah. So what kind of maintenance do we need to do on our concrete lots? Because we have saw cut, control joints and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so there's really only one type of maintenance you can do for concrete, and that's the joint sealing. And that's typically done with a self-leveling silicone. However, 95% of people that have concrete lots don't do any type of joint sealing. I would say that if you want to definitely extend the life of your parking lot, you can do regular joint sealing, and that needs, you know, a joint seal project should last 7 to 8 years before it needs redone. However, we do joint sealing, but I would say that it's not absolutely vital. I think you can realistically put a concrete parking lot down and just not worry about it, except for striping, maybe. So, you know, that how much it extends the overall life of the parking lot versus the cost of the joint sealing. If you really put that on a spreadsheet and looked at it and analyzed it, it probably ends up about a wash.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of, you know, it could come down to kind of the bond issue timeline. You know, if you've got 25 years before you can do anything else to this parking lot, and you know you have to get 25 years, maybe that situation you look at joint sealing. But if not, you know, maybe not.
Right. Have you found, this is maybe off the subject of what you normally do, but have you found that parking lot striping on concrete doesn't last as long as it does on asphalt?
Yes.
Okay.
Especially if it's striped like within a few months. There's a lot of chemicals still in the concrete surface that just kind of prevents it from adhering properly, and very, very common to see paint chipping off and things like that. And sometimes there's just not a lot you can do. A few heavy rains before the striping is applied actually really helps. But I would say that first striping application after new concrete is installed, plan on redoing it the next summer.
Yeah. Yeah. It gets into a whole nother subject. Like I really like white striping on concrete.
Yeah.
Then the tires just leave so much black stuff all over the striping that it ends up looking the same color as the parking lot after a
Yeah.
time. So,
Yeah, for sure.
and anyway, we've tried some really good paints that do help with that. They tend to shed that tire mark a little bit better, but it is
There's a
interesting.
new paint that we've been trying and we really like it. It's called Gorilla Paint, and it's a ultra bright paint. It's a two-part mixing application, and really, really strong, kind of pricey, but we're seeing almost double the life out of it. So companies like Lowe's and McDonald's are all really starting to spec in this paint and require it on their projects. So that's something maybe maybe we do a little test on a parking
Yeah, maybe
lot.
we could do a little test.
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds good. Well, is there, I'm trying to think, is there anything else about concrete that we ought to be thinking about?
No, I just, I would recommend just looking at overall pricing of the projects. If you're looking at replacing a parking lot or adding a new addition, I would just recommend getting a price for both asphalt and concrete. I think we've reached the point where you can't assume that asphalt's going to be way cheaper.
Okay,
In the past, that has definitely been the case, and you could always assume that asphalt's going to be 30 or 40% less.
right.
But depending on your market, depending on the size of the project, it could be surprisingly close and could make a lot of sense. So
Okay,
just probably always good to get both options, and then you can really analyze what makes sense for you.
okay, that makes sense.
Yep.
So what about bidding? Like, pretty much all of us have to bid decent, anything that's a decent sized project.
Yep.
Is there anything that you have seen that you're like, oh, these guys are, missing the boat, or the spec's not tight enough, or, um,
Yeah.
any words of wisdom on that side for us?
Yeah. I would always recommend having someone put a second set of eyes on your specs before you send it out. If that's an engineer you trust or a contractor that you trust, just to make sure that you have the right scope for the right application. It's extremely important. I've seen the copied and pasted specs, out of a book or from an old project that may not apply very well to your, your latest project. So
Right.
um, having that clear set of specifications and expectations for the contractors is very, very important. But I also would say that don't assume that those specs are going to be met, to really, really keep an eye on your project and ensure that you're getting what you pay for.
Yeah. And I know, like, from my architectural background, like, we can get asphalt mix, like cut sheets from your supplier and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Ask for a load ticket. So if you've got an asphalt paving project and it's supposed to be surface, ask for a copy of the load ticket and it'll say surface or base on there.
Okay.
You can do little things like that. And if say you're getting a parking lot seal coated, and it just looks a little off, like maybe it has a kind of a watered down look, or if it's curing brown instead of black, or it looks a little milky, or it's not curing for like 3 days when it should be curing in 10 to 12 hours. That those could be signs of maybe a cheaper material or too much water content. So ask for a sample and send it off and get it tested.
Yeah.
You can see how much water content's in there and see if you got a good product. So there's simple ways that you can, just double check that you're getting a good product.
Yeah. Really what you paid for. I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. Well, Andy, thanks so much for coming on. I end every episode with the same 3 questions, and we kind of call it rapid fire, but sometimes we get off on a tangent and talk for a little bit. But so here's the questions. What would your parents say that you do for a living?
I would say my parents probably say that I've got my hands in a lot of things, and I mean, they obviously know I run businesses, but I think they would say that I work hard and play hard.
There you go.
Yeah,
Do you get your best work done in the morning, or like what time of day do you get your best work done?
100% morning. Uh, so I wake up at probably 4 o'clock still every day, and when I have that first cup of coffee, I am in go mode. But I also wear down really early, so I'm the guy that might be watching football on Sunday night and fall asleep on the recliner at halftime.
Yeah, I know. I get up about 6:30. That's kind of my time. But I hear about these guys getting up at 4. I'm like, you got to go to bed at like 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah,
I can't make it to bed as early as I need to get up early.
yeah. I probably don't get quite enough sleep, but I'm just wired to wake up early, and I enjoy the mornings. It's my clear thinking time
Right.
when before the chaos starts.
Yeah. So last question is, do you use paper, or are you digital planner type guy?
All digital. So sometimes I maybe work like a robot. So I set up my reminders in my calendar to basically steer me every day. So my phone is always dinging. Call this person, send an email to that person, meeting at 11:30, lunch meeting here. I mean, constantly it just kind of tells me where to go. And sometimes I'm driving and I arrive at my destination and don't really remember the drive because I just get in these deep thinking modes all the time. So
Yeah, absolutely.
100% digital. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty much digital. I am a post-it note guy where if I'm on the phone, I'll take a quick note on a post-it note, which I need to move more to my iPad for those kind of things. But anyway,
Yeah. Also a guy that the second I have something to remember, I have to put it in my phone. If I'm in the middle of a conversation and think of something, I will literally stop and say, I have to put this in my phone. And there's so many things to remember, and I don't like forgetting. So
yeah,
I could cross off literally 40 to 50 things in my to-do list every single day. And that's how many things I write down. So
well, that's amazing. Well, you
yeah,
never forget anything that way.
exactly.
You hope you don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, hey, Andy, thanks for coming on. Share with us how people can get a hold of you if they want to reach out with other questions, or get in contact with you.
Yeah, so our website is real easy, encorepavement.com. You can call our office 316-677-8000, or just simply send me an email, and I'll get it right away and respond and get you connected to the right people, or I will go look at it myself a lot of times. So my email is AndyW at Encore, ENCORE, pavement.com.
All right. Well,
So,
thanks so much for coming on, Andy. I really appreciate it. And I learned a whole bunch on this conversation, so I'm sure everybody that listens will as well. And appreciate you sharing your knowledge.
yeah, thanks for having me.